Marhaba! Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers, wherever you may be tuning in from. I'm MK Smith.
And I am Bassam Haddad.
It is our pleasure to be co-hosting the first installment of ASI's brand new initiative, Live with ASI, a month of knowledge production. Today, we're going to bring you some of our most important updates regarding works and publications from over the past month across all of ASI's different branches. For those of you who are still a little bit unfamiliar with the Arab Studies Institute, we are made up of the Arab Studies Journal, which is a peer-reviewed academic journal, our online magazine, Jadaliya, our Status Al-Wada podcast, our Tadween publishing house, and the newest member of our proverbial family, the Middle East Studies Pedagogy Initiative, or MESPI.
As 2020 drags on and the world teeters on the brink of disaster, our team continues with unwavering dedication to bring you cutting-edge knowledge and scholarship, as many of you who follow us probably have seen. And that's why we are here today. There's just too much of it, and we're just trying to sort of summarize it.
Yeah, condense it, make it digestible. So we are excited to introduce you today to Jadaliya's two newest pages. The environment page, which will cover various perspectives on the relationship between environmental factors and developments in the Middle East and North Africa. And the photography and audiovisual narratives page, a resource on visual production in the region and reflections on how the region is represented. We also have several live webinars to highlight for you, so stay tuned.
Because ASI's organizations and projects have become so vast, it was impossible to cover everything for you in a short period, within a short period. So we worked hard to distill our content and organize them according to themes. And the first theme is COVID.
So as Bassam mentioned, we're going to go over how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the region. Jadaliya's new environment page has produced 3 pieces this summer offering critical analyses of the relationship between the pandemic, public health, and environmental justice from historical and contemporary perspectives. These pieces are Middle East history in the time of COVID-19, a roundtable on disease, environment, and medicine, the Quick Thoughts piece by Carly Krakow on the COVID-19 pandemic and environmental racism, and an interview with Helen Lackner titled Water Scarcity, Climate Change, and COVID-19 in Yemen.
Jadaliya also published a piece by Maghreb page co-editor Muriam Hali Davis on developments in Algeria's Hirak movement and state repression since the pandemic began, which you can find in this episode's post, because there will be a post that will be accompanied when this episode is released, and it will have everything hyperlinked. And be sure to keep an eye out for MESPI's forthcoming newsletter focused on COVID-related content. Before we move to our second theme, we would like to share a quick interview I conducted with Robert Vitalis about his new book, Oilcraft. 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 I'm still trying, after 36 years in this country, to speak legibly. Oilcraft, or for which he wrote a Newton, new text out now for Jadaliya. So he already has a Newton on Jadaliya. We interviewed him about the book to share more. And of course, here's what he had to say. As usual, Robert or Bob is always exciting.
Enjoy.
We would like to speak with you today about your book, Oilcraft. I'll just ask you straight out, because we have just a few minutes. Why did you write this book, and why do you think people should read it?
Well, I wrote the book because I've come to the conclusion that oil is like any other commodity. It has no special properties. You buy it and sell it on the world market. You don't have to do anything to access it in particular. You don't have to do anything to get it to refiners. And most of the kinds of political and geopolitical effects we attribute to it, I think there's no evidence for. So to put it another way, people believe a lot of things about oil and geopolitics, a kind of common wisdom, that turn out not to be true. And I try to work through what those beliefs are and why they're not true, and so forth. And then the book spins out from there.
Wonderful. I'm going to take a quote from your Newton review, which is New Text Out Now review on Jadaliya. And these are your own words, and I would like to ask you to comment on them if you don't mind. It says, Oilcraft is a departure as well in that I did not write it for professors or other specialists, although it would be great for use in the classroom, but instead for the left and for anyone else who cares about reversing the disastrous course of militarization of the Gulf, justified too often on the grounds that we, in quotation marks, need to, in quotation marks again, secure access, which progressives think is code for controlling oil or exercising hegemony over Western Europe and Japan, or keeping prices low or high for the benefit of big oil. We should be challenging these factitious beliefs and rather than embracing them. So this is the quote. Can you address the quote and maybe let us know if whether you think oil is a factor at all in those relations?
Well, I think the quote actually kind of speaks for itself. The left is wrong about what they presume about oil. Or put it another way, they presume many things, but have never provided evidence in support of these claims. When you seek the evidence for them, it turns out that they are incorrect. So if the US talks about securing access to oil, the left understands that that's a project of the United States controlling oil in the Middle East. I've never seen demonstrated this control that people just take for granted. Now, control can mean many things for different people, and different leftists have different arguments about what that control means. They don't all think in the same ways, but they're wrong.
Okay, that's fine. We will actually be speaking more with you in a longish interview about the trajectory, your intellectual trajectory, and I will leave the deeper discussion and expansion of all these and other points until then. The Newton is actually extremely revealing. I started reading the book. I couldn't finish it because I called you as soon as I saw that it's out, and it's really important to read it for many reasons, not least the way you come at the topic with the background that you have in terms of the archival work you've done and beyond. Now, can you tell me before we break, can you tell me why you were a bit hesitant about this book being a resource for the classroom? It seems to me that it's actually extremely important for students to be reading this book. Or are you trying to differentiate between undergrad and grad level?
No, I meant it simply that I didn't write it as an academic book. It is not a monograph, right? Where I use, I accumulate massive amounts of archival or other evidence or, statistical evidence, et cetera, in order to make a theoretical claim. The book is almost like, I treat it more like a primer. So in that case, yeah, I think it works. It would definitely work in the undergraduate classroom. I had my own undergraduates in mind when I wrote it, in part because undergraduates assume the following. Undergraduates have the most simplified version of what the United States is doing in the Persian Gulf. Though simplified version is wrong, the sophisticated versions that lefties have are equally wrong. But the simple version is, as my students have always said, it must be that the United States needs Persian Gulf oil ourselves, because why else would we be there in the Persian Gulf? And I work through with them why that's not the case. right? But then, so supposedly more sophisticated arguments or theories follow from, go beyond that point, but I don't find any of them compelling myself.
Our second theme is, well, with a heavy heart, Lebanon. The past month has been a trying one for Lebanon, still reeling from the devastating Beirut explosion on August 4th. Is the sound of the we worked so hard to make the sound of the pen actually appear. So if it does appear, say something in the feed.
Please praise us if you hear it.
Yes,
Say that's awesome.
We're encroaching on
Yeah.
on broadcasting, so we're hoping that what we're doing is working.
Yes, absolutely. So on the topic of Lebanon, in Jadalia's Quick Thoughts piece with Mona Harb, the author discusses how the catastrophic August 4th explosion in Beirut has affected the city's urban landscape and reflects the role of Lebanon's political class in the current crisis. Our co-producer, Carly Krakow, talked to Dr. Harb about developments in Lebanon since the explosion. Here she is.
Hello, I'm Carly Krakow, and I'm so glad to be here today with Dr. Mona Harb, joining me from Beirut. She is a professor at AUB and co-editor of Jadalia. Thank you for being here today, Dr. Harb.
My pleasure, Carly.
Thank you. So we just passed a month since the Beirut explosion, and in your wonderful Quick Thoughts piece, in conversation with Mouin Rabbani for Jadalia, you discussed what still needed to be investigated about the cause of the explosion and the source of the ammonium nitrate. Could you tell us what have we learned in the past month and what information is being withheld or still needs to be found out?
Yes, sure. Well, unfortunately, we still do not know much. We don't know what caused the explosion, nor do we know what is the source of that ammonium nitrate, how it landed in that port. We've heard stories about the welding operation that took place on the afternoon of August 4, the day of the blast, apparently to close some large hole in the hangar where the ammonium nitrate was stored. This might have ignited the explosion, but there are no details about this. People don't really believe it. There are sort of leaks in the newspapers about this. Apparently, the workers who did that welding were arrested, but again, it's all hush-hush. So we are still with a big question mark around these two essential questions. We know also that multiple public officials knew about the ammonium nitrate, and there were several reports about the danger and that it needed to be acted upon, but it seems that they were throwing the hot potato from one to another and nothing happened. Now, what happened practically is that we have now a court that has been tasked with the responsibility of the investigation. This was done just before the government of Hassan Diab resigned, and there has been an appointment of a judge, Fadi Sawan, to lead that investigation. The judicial court is the highest court in the country that is responsible for such investigation, and this might send a message that this will be an independent and reliable investigation. However, there are at least three elements that indicate the contrary. The first is the fact that Judge Fadi Sawan is not completely independent. He has taken legal decisions before to please security officials. That was investigated by Taimur Azhari in Al Jazeera, actually. The second element is that the Judge Awaidat, who oversees, he's the Attorney General who oversees these investigations, seems to be pretty much implicated in the explosion itself. He seemed to have ordered that welding to take place. He's also a parent of the former Minister of Public Works, under which the port belongs, and there seems to be some conflict of interest involved here. And the third element is the fact that there has been arrest. 25 people are arrested, but most of them are low-profile employees of that port, and none of the high-ranked officials who are responsible were touched. So this also indicates a very possible attempt at shifting the blame away, like typically happens in such situations. So in sum, there's No one who has been held accountable, no one resigned, and no public official has made any formal statement about what happened and why it happened.
Thank you for that extremely informative update. So just now, and in your writing, you've addressed key issues of negligence and corruption of the country's ruling elite and the new wave of protests that have emerged. There has also been an international response, including from France, and you referred to all this as positioning on the Lebanese chessboard. Following the already existing financial crisis and obviously so much more, what can we expect next, and how, to use your words, can a people-centered recovery process be ensured at this point?
Yes, that's a great question, actually. Things are moving very rapidly on that front. The French president has already visited Lebanon a second time. He arrived to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the creation of Greater Lebanon. And he arrived with the condition that a new prime minister should have been selected after the resignation of the former government. And this was done. This was in a record time. So we really see that there are things being played in the background, in the corridors of decision making of these geopolitics. The French president seems fully committed to continue his agenda and to implement what he's calling reforms. So he has teams of people who are requesting our Lebanese political rulers to do reforms at the level of finance and economy and banking to ensure that we're actually able to benefit from an IMF bailout and to benefit also from the said pledges that France had made to Lebanon, I think a year or more ago, and to reform the power sector, the energy sector. And we're going to see many of his envoys in the weeks and months to come. He's promised that he's coming back in December. So it very much feels like we're entering what I would call now a neo-mandate era. There's something very new on the geopolitical scene happening vis-a-vis Lebanon. So amidst this, the people-centered recovery that should be really the big title of the response to this horrible explosion is a huge challenge. We have dysfunctional state institutions, there's an overwhelming mistrust in these public institutions. Relief and aid are happening in a very messy, ad hoc and uncoordinated ways. Many actors are mobilized at various scales, on the ground and virtually. There are international organizations mobilizing all their resources, NGOs, INGOs everywhere. It's a very complex scene. And the way to coordinate a response that puts people's livelihood as the main objective is very challenging. So many people are trying to do that. I'll speak from my position. I work with the Beirut Urban Lab at the AUB, where we're trying to support a national committee that was formed by professional syndicates of engineers, architects, lawyers, accountants, and contractors. So we're trying to inform the response and make it as much as possible focused on people's needs, especially the most vulnerable people. So we're trying to highlight the needs of women, children, elderly, migrants, refugees, LGBTQ individuals. It's very complex, but we need to shift the debate and make sure that these people are being urgently addressed in the response. So it's happening, but it's quite uncoordinated and messy, and it's not clear to what extent it's going to materialize.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Harb, for shedding some light on indeed a very complex and crucial situation for Beirut right now. For more on this very important topic, please read Mona Harb's Quick Thoughts piece on the aftermath of the Beirut explosion up on Jadaliyya now.
My turn. Okay, my turn. Jadaliyya hosted a live virtual event titled Conversation on Lebanon with Jadaliyya's own Ziad Abu Rish, Nadim Al-Qaq of the Lebanese Center for Policy Studies, and Aya Majzoub from Human Rights Watch, all of whom are based in Beirut. And this event that we hosted took place the weekend after the Beirut port explosion and highlights what is known about the nature, extent, and effects of the explosion on 4 August. The discussion also provided updates on relief efforts, the political fallout, ongoing protests, and potential developments. Additionally, the event also served as a benefit fundraiser for the Lebanese Red Cross, one of the primary organizations on the ground in Beirut, providing rescue and relief efforts for those affected by the explosion because the fantastic state is not doing its job. Um, as well, of course, these efforts provide medical attention to those in need during the protests.
Jadaliya has also published a number of pieces that we highly encourage our audience to check out to help better contextualize their understanding of this explosion. These pieces include Quick Thoughts, Ziad Abu Rish and Maya Mikdashi on Lebanon's multiple crises, and Compounded Crises. Ziad Abu Rish reports on the chemical explosion in Beirut. Up next, a quick word about an exciting new initiative by Status Al-Wada Audiovisual Magazine, which is really an umbrella podcast for so many podcasts. You'll get it when you visit the site. You'll see just how much it has to offer.
First, the environment page. This sounds like it's a real broadcast. I'm beginning to feel it. Assalamu alaikum.
Congratulations. Wa alaikum salam. Thank you.
First, the environment page launched the new Environment in Context podcast, Environment in Context podcast series for Status Al-Wada. Recent episodes have included cement war and toxicity, the materialities of displacement in Iraq, co-hosted by Huma Gupta and Gabby Kirk, and featuring Kali Rubai. And also, another podcast, Green Energy, Colonialism in the Occupied Syrian Golan Heights, hosted by Malihe Razazan and featuring Muna Dejani and Wael Tarabai. Just to be clear, Huma Gupta and Gabi Kirk are co-editors of the Environment page, and Malihe Razazan is our stalwart leader at Status Al-Wada podcast.
Status also released a great episode on gender and the politics of Islamic studies, where Professor Keisha Ali's keynote speech at the 17th Annual Duke UNC Middle East and Islamic Studies Graduate Student Conference discussed the critical question of how the politics of Islamic studies are gendered and what this means for the field. Our third theme is that of Syria. Some of you may have noticed that Syria is in the news less and less. Fortunately, our editors are all hands on deck regarding developments in Syria and making sure that our audience is up to date on what's happening.
Bashar al-Assad assumed power in July 2000, and this year marks 2 decades of his rule. Jadaliya Syria page co-editors hosted a roundtable conversation titled 20 Years After Bashar al-Assad's Succession. And we titled it this way because the main event is the 20 years rather than actually Bashar's rule for many, many reasons that we kind of got into in the roundtable, and you can check that out. In the roundtable, we reflected on this journey. I was actually a part of the roundtable, and we discussed how Assad's ascent to the Syrian presidency brought promises of modernization and change with continuity, which is a big phrase in Syria, starting with what was briefly called the Damascus Spring in 2000-2001, which promised a political opening, and ending with the dubious announcement in 2005 of the social market economy, which promised better economic opportunities. But what Syrians actually experienced was more social and economic polarization, leading to the uprising of 2011. And we know what happened after.
So, as we all know, there's a ton going on in Syria, or things that have unfolded recently. And unless you study Syria, you might not have had the chance to stay up to date on all that's happening. So fortunately, the co-editors of Jadaliya's Syria page have efficiently summarized the various developments there in a longish but easy to understand and read post titled Engaging Syria Today. It takes stock of important developments with the goal of initiating an ongoing conversation. You can share your thoughts or article by emailing syria@jadaliya.com.
Another great, actually, we do have a note. And for the note, I am going to actually change views here. So the idea is that we're doing this broadcast, and this broadcast include probably more than 70 or 80 links, which people cannot keep up with naturally. So we are actually including all the links, hyperlinked in the post that will be published along with this broadcast in the next couple of days. Although we do have a second part of the broadcast on Thursday, also at 1 p.m. So if you miss something, you can go to the post and then you can click on any of the links in order to watch, read, enjoy, and what have you. All right. So next, another resource on Syria was recently produced by our publishing house, Tadween Publishing, titled The Syria Quarterly Report, which is published every quarter, I must say.
Oh my God.
Can you
That's what that stands for?
Ma'ul?
And Jed,
Which you can find in this episode's post as well. This report is a critical archive of media and news coverage of the ongoing conflict in Syria, curated by editors at Jadaliya and Salon Syria, and published in English and Arabic. So everything is translated immediately, and it's all in the publication. In the latest issue, readers will find weekly news roundups and reports from the first quarter of 2019 and on. We're also psyched. This is the scriptwriter, Muhammad Abu Ghazala. Thanks, Muhammad. I don't usually say we're psyched.
That's a lie. He says it all the time.
I say psyched.
Every other word is psyched.
That's true. Okay.
Yeah.
طيب. We're also psyched to announce the launching of the Justice to Transcend Conflict Report, which you can also find in this episode post, put together by the fantastic Syria Center for Policy Research and led by the inimitable.
I live in an anemone. Inimitable.
By the unparalleled Rabi' Nasser. Next, our fourth theme is on the Maghreb.
As part of the launch of Jadaliya's new photography and audio-visual narratives page, which if you think it's long to listen to, it's even longer to say out loud, which coincided with Algeria's Independence Day, we held a live online discussion on the Battle of Algiers film, facilitated by Buthaina Kazim, founder of Cinema Akil. The discussion revolved around the film's impact on the aftermath of Algerian independence, how it has inspired the genre of revolutionary cinema, and its influence on discussions about colonial and subaltern narratives and their representations on screen and beyond.
The photography and audiovisual narratives page, also our longest title for
Yes.
our page, also published a great piece titled Photography.
You can do it, you can do it, you can do it.
Amazing.
What?
I'm placing the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable. Photographing confinement. Photographing. How would you say it? You were born here.
Photographing
Confinement, where Samia Henni, I am not sure if it's a ha or a ha, Samia Henni or Henni, tells the violent history of the military-controlled camps the French army created in Algeria during the Algerian Revolution, 1954 to 1962, in order to isolate the Algerian population from the influence of national liberation fighters and to impede possible psychological and material support.
In an article published by the Arab Studies Journal, which this spring produced their first ever open access edition, so check it out on their website, arabstudiesjournal.org, the Arab Studies Journal published an article titled Militia Soundscapes in Post-Qaddafi Libya. Layla Tayyib weaves together performance ethnography, geography, and sound studies. Tayyib reveals how music is one of many quotidian sonic practices that help produce militia power. Tayyib interrupts the conventional narration of Libya's statelessness and its ostensibly bereft institutional landscape, and instead reveals the range of audible and palpable ways that militias make claims to sovereign power.
In another ASJ article titled In Search of Algeria, Between Literature, History, and Cultural Studies, Idris Jabari explores recent works that redress Algeria's marginalization in Middle Eastern studies. He reads works by Patrick Crowley, Valérie Orlando, and Tristan Leperlier. Do that. Let me see you guys born here do that. and Tristan Leperlier that illustrate a growing appetite for expanding the field of Algerian studies to new chronologies and new themes while offering an intelligible account of Algerianness.
And finally, on the topic of the Maghreb, Jadaliya published an article titled Morocco's Double Infallibility. Here, Gabriel Davis draws on the context in which the Green March took place in 1975 and its current commemoration in Morocco, and examines the different practices that younger generations of Moroccans undertake in order to relate to and sustain the memory of this event. Be sure to check out this episode's post for another great article on the Maghreb titled, and I'm going to have Bassam say it because I would not like to do a disservice to the French language and attempt to pronounce this.
I also am not sure if this is gonna work. Can we put it up? Is this it?
لا.
Okay, if we can put it up, it will help because basically Tin Zawatin.
The author.
Zawati. Okay, titled. Sorry.
No, I lied. Never mind. Don't listen.
Titled Tin Zawatin, marginalisation et militarisation aux confins des frontières algériennes.
So that's for the francophones in the audience.
Yeah. So, yeah. And now we actually are going to take a 3-second break. Mute. One of the things we'd like to say is that the efforts that are being displayed here are a result of dozens of people. And we would like to thank all of them profusely for being stellar, generous, and having the most wonderful and enduring and beautiful spirit for putting this work together. Not just now, but from the early 1990s, since all of these projects started. So thank you all very much. The other thing I'd like to say is that our partners have actually been instrumental in everything that we've been doing, whether it's the Arab Council for the Social Sciences based in Beirut, or the Georgetown Center for Contemporary Arab Studies here at Georgetown Georgetown, DC, Maghreb, Middle East Report, with its dozens of amazing scholars who are doing awesome work, many of whom are actually part of the co-editor teams at Jadaliya and at ASI, as well as other partners like Northwestern, who contribute tremendous content via our status podcast, Stanford, with whom we have connected quite a bit lately in terms of working together on producing these lectures, or at least broadcasting them, and LSE in London, with whom we have done a few major events, as well as the Arab Barometer, with whom we have collaborated at MESPI, and we are putting together something really expansive that has to do with the uprisings in the coming months. And the Arab Barometer is based at Princeton and run by Amani Jamal, and many other institutions, which we will address as we go forward, because there's absolutely no time for us to say thank you to everyone. So we will slowly share this material with everybody as we move forward. So I just wanted to share that before we do another quick interlude, so that MK can catch her breath.
Yes, I just did so much speaking. Thank you.
Okay, fine. I'm enjoying pushing the buttons.
I mean, I am too. It's okay. It's okay. So, as you most likely know, it has been a busy summer for Palestine, Palestinians, and Palestinian studies.
In an exciting interview titled Reflections on Palestinian Studies, Jadaliya co-editor Shireen Sayali asks Beshara Doumani about the process of establishing the Mahmoud Darwish Professorship of Palestinian Studies, which is the first endowed chair of its kind in the United States. They talk about challenges and significance and the state, they talk about challenges and significance and the state of Palestinian studies in the United States. The interview ends with some reflections on the global pandemic and the immense grief and hope of the Floyd uprising in the US.
And Dr. Doumani was so kind and generous with his time and allowed us a follow-up interview conducted by one of the show's co-producers, Carly Krakow. Let's check out what he had to say.
Hello, I'm Carly Krakow, and I'm delighted to be joined today by Dr. Beshara Doumani. In July, Dr. Doumani became the inaugural holder of the Mahmoud Darwish Chair in Palestinian Studies at Brown University, the first endowed chair in the United States dedicated to this field. Thank you so much for being here today, Dr. Doumani.
Oh, thank you, Carly, for the interview.
In your recent interview with Jadalia co-editor Dr. Shireen Saikali, you spoke about the establishment of this chair as the culmination of a long effort, but also the start of a new phase for Palestinian studies. We're linking to that full interview for everyone to listen in, but with the time we have today, I wondered if you could begin by telling us how you envision this important development will impact the continued expansion of Palestinian studies as a robust and growing field.
Culmination of an effort in the sense that the conditions of possibility for the establishment of this chair were set by activists like you and others. The wonderful work they've done over many years has created an environment which allowed such a development and institutionalization of Palestinian studies. On a smaller scale, is somewhat similar to how civil rights movement or women's movement or environmental movements have led to positions within universities. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands that this is really a result of a collective effort. Having said that, institutionalization of a field of study does have some benefits. One of them being bestowing a certain kind of credibility on a field. Of course, we don't need anybody's credibility to do what we do, or recognition of credibility to do what we do, but nevertheless, it means something for an Ivy League university to establish such a chair. I hope it will set an example for other universities, and that this will really precipitate a larger institutionalization of Palestinian studies. Palestinians, as you well know, have been erased discursively and materially in so many different ways. And in terms of knowledge production, this will help center Palestinian voices in the writing of their own history and producing knowledge about them.
Thank you so much for those critical points to give us the essential background. You've spoken about Darwish, for whom this chair is named, as a figure who transcended categories and whose legacy exceeds the colonial frame and the confining identities of either solely victim or resistor. How does naming this chair after Darwish complement your vision of Palestinian studies, as you've described, as a field that focuses on, to use your words, people rather than simply geography?
Yes, we thought long and hard about the name for this chair. It's very important for people to know that there are multiple donors behind this chair, and therefore we were free really to give it an identity that transcends the particular donor to a university. And Darwish, as you know, probably articulated the Palestinian condition and how it's changed over time, as there are many Darwishes really. In his long career, better than almost anyone. And we can always find a quote from him that expresses precisely what we mean to say. I have focused a lot on pushing this field towards Palestinian as opposed to Palestine studies, though of course they're very much related and overlap. And I just the other day found a quote from Darwish I'd like to share with you in a 1995 book that he did. He says, Palestinian poetry has, for less than a decade, and he's writing in 1995, become conscious of the necessity of humanizing its themes and passing from Palestine as a topic or an object to Palestinian as a subject. So that, in a way, expresses what I mean to say, focusing on the social, focusing on the human, regardless of geography, brings in all three major segments of the Palestinian population, especially the over 6 million that are in exile in the diaspora and have been largely forgotten in recent studies. But it also focuses on the social conditions of everyday life of people and how these are very much political in a broad sense of the word. Politics is hardwired into the Palestinian condition, and I think it's important to push in that direction.
Thank you so much for those key points and for bringing in that perfect quote, really, from Darwish as well. I also wanted to pick up on something I think you mentioned a bit earlier, and also just now about connections between struggles. Of course, the news about this chair arrives amid great continued struggle for Palestinians and during a time of international solidarity with struggles against racism in the US and worldwide. What do you think the long-term impacts will be for Middle East studies and for intersectional approaches across disciplines to the type of work that you've been doing your entire career, focusing on people and histories marginalized by mainstream scholarship?
I think the establishment of this chair kind of clarifies or brings into greater focus things that have already been going on for a long time. The Palestinian condition has in many ways become symbolic of a global condition. The Palestinian struggle for freedom in many ways has become a symbol for many other struggles for freedom. Palestinians are in many ways a canary in the mine for some of the biggest global challenges that we're facing. And people who are concerned about other issues, whether it's the pipeline across indigenous lands in this country or struggles of marginalized people in India, or Kashmir, the Palestinian condition, there's a lot there for them to identify with. At the same time, I'm very conscious of our positionality here. As a Palestinian in the United States, I'm in many ways a part of a settler project, living on indigenous lands, and it's also very much affected by, and in many ways, shaped by the legacy of slavery in this country. And it's these issues of race, racialization, and indigenous struggles that we have to give primacy to in this country. And this is where a lot of the focus that we have for progressive work actually takes place. But it's good to know, and it's good to feel this young generation, which has been an absolute pleasure and is very inspiring to teach and very inspiring for me. They seem to take this intersectionality complex, really, question of intersectionality almost naturally and understand it almost instinctively. And I have high hopes for this generation, change the world in many ways that my generation maybe failed to do.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Doumani, for your time and insight. There's obviously so much more that could be said, but we'll leave it there, unfortunately, for today. And before we do go, I have to ask you to tell us about your beautiful backdrop in the background there. I know we were speaking a bit about it earlier.
So that's a picture I took while taking a hike in California a long time ago. And it shows it as my background for Zoom, which is now the reality of our life, because it bends, but it doesn't break. And I think that's where we are in many ways, under a lot of pressure, but we will bend and survive and not break. And so that's what message of that. Thank you for picking up on it.
Well, thank you. And yeah, perfect note to end on. But thank you again for being here. And we're really looking forward to your future work and very excited about this development. For more on this important topic, please listen to Beshara Doumani's interview titled Reflections on Palestinian Studies, which is up on Jadaliyya now.
Thank you very much.
Great, that was a fantastic interview. So next, as the Israeli annexation, I'm going to caveat that, as the official policy to annex the West Bank seems to be looming, Jadalia's Mouin Rabbani, in his Quick Thoughts piece on Israeli annexation, examines the long pedigree of annexation in Israeli policy, how it has once again dominated the agenda of U.S.-Israeli-Palestinian relations, and why Israel abstained from extending sovereignty over the West Bank territory on July 1st.
For more on Palestine, take a look at the Arab Studies Journal article, Paradise Lost, Land and Labor in 1950s Galilee by Lily Ilan, and a second piece, Jadaliya's Urgent Appeal, or Jadaliya's article titled Urgent Appeal. 83 groups urge UN special procedures regarding Israel's willful killing of Ahmad Ariqat, both of which you can find in this episode's post. You'll also find the Middle East Pedagogy Initiative's collection of peer-reviewed articles on Palestine, Israel, and race, as well as a collection of essential readings on the left in Mandate Palestine by Musa Bouderi. More on that in the second part of this episode, which will actually be this Thursday at 1 p.m. And the reason we split them is because this particular episode is longer than usual, because it's not just about 1 month, it's about
Summer.
kind of couple months. So future episodes will only be about 1 month, and we are trying to wrap things up within 45 minutes for the entire episode, as opposed to this time.
So we really do hope to see you on Thursday at 1 p.m. Thank you so much to everyone who has tuned in today. We hope to see you again on Thursday, and then again after that for next month's episode of Live with ASI. From Washington, D.C., this is MK Smith.
And this is Bassam. We're signing off. Thank you, everyone, for watching
Thank
and
you.
tuning in. Please feel free to share this post and look out for the final production of this post, as well as, the video, as well as the list of hyperlinks that will connect you to everything that was shared in this post. Before we break, I would like to say a few words about the team. The team is going to actually appear in the credits next, but I would like to credit everyone who has lifted a finger and worked on this project. The producers of this show are Muhammad Abu Ghazala, myself, Bassam, Haddad, Carly Krakow, and MK Smith. The script is written by Muhammad Abu Ghazala. The hosts are us. The interviewers are Carly Krakow and myself. The video editor is Alicia Rodriguez. The transitions designer is MK Smith. And the live broadcast producer is I am. The broadcast setup and lighting includes a team of wonderful people, wonderful people, period. And these are Khalid Namiz, Jose Garcia, Julian Namiz, and myself. I'm I'm very involved. Yes, this is the kind of thing I wanted to share, because these people have spent a good deal of the past month putting this together, and we will continue to refine it as we go along. Thank you again for joining us, and for sharing this link, and for reading, listening, and watching.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.